Folks, friends, believe me, what I love to speak about is goodness and decency. I don't like speaking about hatred. I don't like speaking about all the negative aspects of life that confront us. But sometimes that's the world that we live in, and sometimes Jewish leaders, all leaders, need to address realities that are not so pleasant. We know that hatred is a problem being expressed and being thrown in the direction of people of all backgrounds and all kinds of circumstances. And we know that hatred expressed toward Jews, Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, is something which continues to be a problem in this country for sure, elsewhere for sure, and needs to be addressed. And we need to address it in a way that is honest and forthright. So I'll just begin a few moments of reflection, and there's more to be said about every aspect of what I'm going to share. That there was a letter that was written by an entertainment organization in Los Angeles, MRC Entertainment, recently. And here is just a portion of what that letter shared. This morning, after discussion with our filmmakers and distribution partners, we made the decision not to proceed with any distribution for our recently completed documentary about Kanye West. We cannot support any content that amplifies his platform. Kanye is a producer and sampler of music. Last week, he sampled and remixed a classic tune that has charted for over 3,000 years. The lie that Jews are evil and conspire to control the world for their own gain. This song was performed a cappella in the time of the pharaohs, Babylon and Rome. It went acoustic with the Spanish Inquisition and Russia's Pale of Settlement, and Hitler took the song electric. Kanye has now helped mainstream it in the modern era. It is a wonderfully written letter, and it expresses what I believe is an appropriate response to Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, that had enormous influence on the world stage. My message this morning for the next moments is that we need to be united. We need to be united for sure against expressions of hatred towards any human being, and I've spoken about that multiple times. But what I want to say this morning is that people who are connected to the Jewish community need to be united against hatred that is aimed at Jews. We are a tribal people. We have always been a tribal people. We have ethnic tribes within the Jewish community. We have ideological, political tribes. We have tribes that we have a very strong loyalty to, and yet I am going to encourage, urge, beg us to transcend our own tribal identities when it comes to recognizing hatred against Jews that comes from all places, that reflects multiple narratives. They are all dangerous. They all need to be called out. They all need to be opposed. And I'm going to take a step back and give us a brief history lesson. So David Ben-Gurion, first prime minister of Israel, he elevated a concept known as mamlachtiyut. What was mamlachtiyut? It was the idea that he believed that everyone who was involved in the establishment of Medinat Yisrael had to transcend their own ideological tribes in order to be supportive of this emerging nation. And there were two moments in Israel's history when that happened in ways that are impressive and splendid. And I want to thank my teacher, Micha Goodman, contemporary Israeli thinker, for pointing out these two periods. And you'll understand, I hope, where I'm going with this. In 1982, Israel was fighting the Lebanon War. The IDF at the time was led by people mostly who leaned toward the left. And many of these people themselves, officers in the Israeli army, opposed the war in Lebanon. In fact, literally, they would go home from the front to what later became Kikar Rabin in Tel Aviv, and they would protest the war. And then when the protests were over and they had to go back to the front, they put their uniforms back on and they fought, and many of them actually died defending Medinat Yisrael. A very strong instance in which the greater good of Medinat Yisrael, mamlachtiyut, transcended the ideological identity. And then it happened in reverse in 2005, when Israel's government made the decision to leave Gaza. And at that time, the IDF largely was led by people who politically, ideologically leaned toward the right. And many of them opposed leaving Gaza, and they did it. And they did it largely without incident, because again, mamlachtiyut, the larger good of this nation, was ultimately transcending the individual ideological predilections. We are now as tribal as ever. America is tribalized ideologically and politically. The Jewish people are tribalized ideologically and politically. But it is so important for us to recognize a threat that impacts all of us and to get past the blind spots of our own ideological camps. Professor Deborah Lipstadt of Emory University, recently appointed as special envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism, has said many, many times we often have a hard time calling out anti-Semitism when it comes from our ideological or political tribe. So I want to urge us, I can't do it strongly enough, to keep our eyes open. Anti-Semitism comes from the left and it comes from the right. Anti-Semitism comes from people of all racial and ethnic and political backgrounds. It includes narratives about Israel's illegitimacy, about the Jews controlling business and the media, about the Jews replacing white people, about Jews not being fully American. All of these are anti-Semitic narratives. We need to understand. Our children and grandchildren need to understand. Now, obviously, we have to consider our connection to the broader human family. I will continue to speak about that. But my purposes this morning are to urge all who are connected to the Jewish people, let's remove whatever blinders prevent us from seeing anti-Semitism within our own ideological and political tribes. At the end of this morning's parashah, we read that the world was safa achat. It spoke one language, and then the building of that tower, and everybody was separated, and we started speaking different languages, and that was the beginning of different tribes. Can we, every now and then, as we realize how high the stakes are, recognize safa achat, the one language that connects us as Jewish people, and the one language beyond that that connects us as human beings? Can we transcend what makes us proudly different to embrace that which connects us together and to fight passionately against those who very much want to pull us apart? I hope the answer to that is yes. Shabbat Shalom.